so next thing I'm going to do is I have my slab and I'm going to start building my Japanese tea bowl. So you can see I've already put a little bit of texture on my slab, and so anything like stamping especially you want to do before you put your tea bowl together. So I'm going to use this stamp. Now stamping can be anything. You can press a tool into the clay, a textured piece of plastic into the clay. Anything can be a stamp. A stamp is anything. So I'm going to take some cornstarch, so just a little bit, and I'm going to brush it on like that. So I don't need a ton of cornstarch, just a little bit to help it not stick to the clay. And I'm going to do this half of my slab. And I'm going to gently take my roller and I'm going to press firmly onto my clay, but I don't want to make the clay spread out too much. So I want to press into the clay, but I don't want to smash it because that way the clay is going to spread out to make your tea bowl uneven. And then I'm going to carefully peel away. All right, my stamp came out pretty good. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do some carving. So I like to try to have all three textures on each piece. So I could do something as simple as carving with a loop tool. So this is the type of loop tool right here. I don't recommend carving with your needle tool because the needle tool will weaken your cup and the lines get too deep and they usually make it crack. So always use this tool when you're carving thin lines. So I'm just going to carve some lines straight down. Okay, so I'm trying to come up with a design here. I've used this stamp texture over here, and I'm carving right here. And now I'm going to attach on some little pieces that I have made already that kind of mimic my stamped texture. So to attach them on, notice they're not too thick. You don't want to attach pieces that are like 1 inch thick because they're going to blow up later. So I'm going to score the back, so I'm scratching up the back of whatever it is I'm attaching. And I'm scratching on my slab where I want it to go. So I have 3 of them. I'm going to do 3. And then I'm going to use this liquid clay called slip. And I'm going to put a little bit of slip over my score marks. And then I'm going to press on my piece, making sure it's really, really stuck. I think I'll add one more. So this just gives a nice variety of texture to my piece, so that way it's not boring. If you just stick with one texture, it's going to be kind of boring. You want to make sure to really think about where you're putting everything and why you're putting it in that spot, because it makes a big difference. So my slab has some interesting stuff going on right now. It has stamping, carving, and attaching. Now, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to gently stand up my clay, and I'm going to start forming it in a circle. Now, over here, what I need to do is I need to score, so that's scratching with a needle tool. I'm going to score where it's going to attach. So I'm scoring the front end of this piece, and I'm scoring the back of this piece where they're going to overlap. And I'm going to add some slip, like that. And then I'm going to gently press them together. Now, you can blend these together if you want. I like to leave them so that you can still see the seam. But notice I'm putting one hand on the inside and one hand on the outside to make sure it's really attached well. All right, so you're going to lose a little bit of texture over here, but I can go back later and cover that up with more attachments or with something else. And so I'm just going to clean it up, make sure it's nice and pretty looking. And then I'm going to decide which part of my cup is going to be the top. So I think what I have up here is going to be the top of my cup. And so I'm going to take my needle tool and I'm going to make a mark, or 4 marks. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I've marked the 4 corners across from each other. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by cutting out a little triangle, just like that. So then I'm going to use this triangle and I'm going to match up the line with my other marks, and I'm going to trace that triangle and cut out the same triangle. And this is important because you want to make sure we're about to make our cup into an actual cup, and so you want to make sure that you don't want to have a lopsided cup. So that's why it's important to measure and trace your triangle. All right, so now I'm gonna score again. So I'm gonna score these little triangle cutouts, the inside edges. So notice I'm not being very timid when I score. I really scratch it up because scoring and slipping will make sure your clay sticks together and it won't come back apart. So I'm gonna put some slip in there, just like that. Then I'm gonna start squeezing my cup together. So I have to really make sure it's stuck, because if you don't kind of squeeze it together, you're going to have your cup split apart on you later. So yes, you will lose some texture, but you can always go back. You can't stamp again, but you can always go back and add some sort of carving or attaching after you've put your cup together. So the more careful you are now, the better off it will be. So notice here, I can't see a crack. My edges are nice and smooth. I've smoothed them out from the inside too. And then, so now I have the start of my cup. So next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take an extra piece of slab and I'm gonna put my cup on top of the slab. I'm gonna very carefully trace around it so that I know how big my slab needs to be. So then I'm gonna cut out my slab, just like that. And I'm going to score the edge where my cup is going to attach. So I'm making a base for my cup. After this, my cup will be able to hold water and all that good stuff. So I'm scoring the bottom of this too. So I'm scoring and slipping to help it attach to itself, putting some slip on. And then I'm going to, from the inside, right here, I'm gonna take my finger and I'm gonna blend. I'm gonna kind of really make sure the cup is stuck to the base, because if it's not, it could leak water or something like that down the road. And then I can go around the outside and I can help smooth that into my cup as well. So notice I'm being really careful with my cup. My cup is still really soft, but I'm making sure that I don't want to lose any of my texture. So if I touch my cup too much, I'm gonna lose all my pattern that I worked so hard to put on there. And so I can just keep making that prettier. All right, so that is how I made a Japanese tea bowl. At this point, you can